All right, kia ora and welcome along to our extraordinary council meeting for Tuesday, 7th of July. It's a really big day for us today. I do have a few apologies. Councillor Linwood is an apology today, but an apology for lateness from Councillor McCone. And we've got Councillor Lewis and Cowles joining us online today. So welcome. So welcome to everyone who is watching online and to councillors and staff. I will get Councillor or Deputy Mayor Ryan to move the apologies. We have a seconder there. Councillor Fowling, all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against, that's carried. Right, and now we will move into declarations of interest. Is there anyone that wants to put a declaration of interest, councillors? No declarations of interest, so we're going to move on to the public forum. And we have a submission that's come through overnight from the Waitaki Irrigators Collective. So I'll pass over to yourselves to speak. You've got 5 minutes in the public forum. Franz, can you help with the microphone there? Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, staff and councillors. Thank you for this opportunity this morning to speak to our submission on the Head Start program and the direction that the Waitaki Irrigators Collective believe is appropriate. To my right is Matt Ross, who's the chair of the North Otago Irrigation Company, and to his right is Dave Gordon, who's the chair of the Lower Waitaki Irrigation Company. They are two of the 6 irrigation schemes that are represented by the Waitaki Irrigators Collective, and they are very glad, as we all are, for the opportunity to meet with you and to express our position on what is an incredibly important and potentially historic decision that this council will be making.
Just echo the same comments. Thank you for having us. Good morning, councillors, Mayor Tavendale and the council staff. I just wanted to provide, you've got our written submission, so I won't go through that specifically. I just wanted to provide, I guess, 2 points as a high-level summary. The first, from our point of view, in my opinion anyway, and in relation to us as an entity, irrigated primary sector farming is a common and aligned, I guess, land use and activity for the regions to the north. So the North Otago, South Canterbury environment, broadly similar to the catchments that head between here and Christchurch. Our rivers are largely similar, Southern Alps fed rivers. They all have some element of hydroactivity in them. They've got environmental minimum flows, and then there's an amount of abstraction that goes with those two. And then you've got the resulting towns, whether it's Timaru, Ashburton, Oamaru, broadly service towns for primary sector agriculture, and most of that comes from irrigation. So I guess we just wanted to make that as a point. As soon as you look at alternatives to that, you end up with a range of issues that become quite complex, and they're not aligned or they're not similar, and then making decisions around or how you regulate that environment becomes complex and just difficult. I wanted to highlight the next point, which is in the Waitaki, we are quite unique because we've got the Waitaki Catchment Water Allocation Plan. It's the only one of its kind in New Zealand. It's fully government legislated, and it's been in play since 2006, July 2006, so 20 years in operation. It's the only one of its kind in New Zealand. It has an allocation to a range of activities, whether it be minimum flows, hydro generation, mahinga kai allocations, quite unique, and it's a fundamental part of our catchment and our region here. So if we end up in a situation where you have 2 jurisdictions across that, which we currently do have now, you end up in a world where you can have 2 different types of planning architecture asking you to do 2 different things about the same activity. For both of our schemes, Dave will provide a further example, but for both of our schemes, we have take consents that are currently held with Environment Canterbury, and we have use consents which are with the Otago Regional Council, and the framework that we operate in is quite different. So we've got the current reality with the Otago Regional Council is we don't have much framework at all. So we voluntarily comply and deliver like land use framework consistent with Environment Canterbury. And in the NOIC scheme, we have shareholders that are on both sides of the line. So from our point of view, as a large piece of community infrastructure that drives this part of the world, for farming anyway, it's really difficult and problematic if we end up in two environments. So when you've got an allocation plan that's, as I think it's been robust, it's been through several review processes and has been changed, through the Canterbury Water Management Strategy and using 20 years of planning framework. That's the environment we've got. So if there was a risk that could be split, in our view, that would be that's taking on some serious risk and creating a whole lot of uncertainty for a large chunk of your ratepayer and community here. So we think that's really important not to be overlooked. And we're currently in a world where we have operated with those two different environments, but both of our schemes and several of the others in this area that are attached to the WIC submission are going to reconsenting between 2028 and 2030. And going into that environment with unknown outcomes or potentially consideration of splitting the operating environment, to us is fraught with risk. So I'll leave it there and hand over to Dave.
Look, Matt's covered most of that, but I just want to reiterate from a Lower Waitaki perspective, obviously, the split catchment issue that Matt said there, is real when it comes down to the fact that at the moment, when it comes to reconsenting, we deal with ECAN, obviously, as far as the take consent goes, and most of the communication that we have between farmers and examples of good practice and best management practice all come from the north side of the river, so from the ECAN perspective. But that is obviously voluntary on our side of the river, so you end up in a situation where, you're trying to optimise and operate a best practice, but we don't actually have from the IC a regulatory framework around that. So it provides a lot of uncertainty when it comes to reconsenting and what you're trying to do as a scheme with your shareholders and so forth, and the examples you're trying to lead when you've got a catchment split with regulatory authorities like what we've got. So it's really just that emphasis on the catchment as one, creates a lot more certainty for us and probably gives us a lot more strength when you're actually dealing with one organisation and looking at a pathway, because this thing's not just a 2-year journey that we've got around reconsenting. It's a 25 to 30-year framework, something that's been in the past for a significant amount of time, and now obviously we're looking to the future for a significant amount of time. So that's where we see the whole alignment around whole catchment, and what's going on with our northern neighbours being extremely important.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any questions at all? Councillor Slack.
Just for clarity, thanks for your submission, by the way. I don't think you're going to get a lot of arguments out of that. But just for clarity, you mainly speak about the river, but you actually mean the whole of the Waitaki River catchment, which of course is a much wider area than just the river.
Yes, correct. So the allocation plan that I spoke about it runs from the mountains to the sea. So it has a range of allocation frameworks for the different parts of the catchment, but we see it as a sum of all parts. Yep.
Councillor Fallon.
In my experience, in applying for a lot of consents from Otago and Canterbury, in Canterbury you tend to need 3 times as many consents, and they cost twice as much and take up to 9 months to get them. In Otago, it's a lot more efficient. With the Resource Management Act being renewed or basically reformed, would you hope that the Otago approach and efficiency could transfer into Canterbury?
It's two-edged or two-sided coin, this one, because ECAN have been and are known to be quite obstructive and difficult to deal with on the one hand. On the other hand, the rule framework is really clear with ECAN. The problem we've got, which is the other side of the coin, with Otago Regional Council, is that their planning framework is not as obvious and not as tight as the northern one. And that means you find yourself in a little bit of no man's land. So to the points that were made before around our reconsenting, we have to be extremely mindful that on the one hand, we're applying for water take consent from the northern regulator. And in many cases, the water use itself is on the south side in the Otago space. And the inconsistency of regulation there is proving to be a real problem for us. So we prefer tighter regulations that are clear to us, which we can work with, which we can comply with, than looser regulations, which sometimes work in your favour, but generally are unhelpful.
Could I just add to Councillor Thowning, the aspect from a on-farm point of view? So I farm right on the boundary. So I'm actually required to farm with Environment Canterbury requirements. And so we've got 20 years of audited farm environment plans, and you know those well yourself. I don't think that's the end of the world. We can work with that. I agree that there are some parts of the consenting process, not just for Environment Canterbury, but nationwide, that are a little bit overzealous and could be more than they need to be. But the reality is the last 20 years through Canterbury and the water management strategy and things, there are good on-farm outcomes being delivered, and there are good, transparent environmental planning processes that are being independently audited that show that you can look after the land, And so if that's an overall outcome from farming, I'd make, as a farmer, I'm more than happy with that. That's fine, because I don't want regulatory requirements to come down on us and tell people what to do with no basis. So if we can provide a track record like we've been able to do for 20 years, then all I would ask in return is that for doing that work and producing those results and making them available, that people then look at the information that comes from that and we make future decisions based on that, rather than having an opinion on something or feeling like something might be getting worse or better. Let's look at the data. So, and I take your point, but information and outcomes helps all of us make better decisions for the future.
No, thank you, Matt. I'm going to draw it to a close there, but we'll say thank you. And certainly in the catchment space, both our questionnaire and our public meetings have been really clear, messaging back to us that catchment is really important. So we do absolutely take that on board. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time. All right, so councillors, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move now that we do suspend standing orders, because I think the conversation from here is really important. Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Hopkins. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Again and against, that's carried. So just to let you know what that means is it allows for us to have a bit more of a conversational space, and then when we do have a recommendation on the table, I will put standing orders back into place, and that'll mean we then have the ability for each person to speak once before we continue on. Today is a really important day, and it's probably one of the biggest we'll ever have around the council table. But I want to be really clear that while this is a direction setting around the detail and how we make anything work moving forward, there's so much still to be done, and there's a lot of decisions still to be made. Whatever gets decided on, if anything, today, we'll then have another decision point, which will be in the Head Start proposal space if we do go into that space. So basically, we'll have a few different touch points as to how we land on decisions, and then we do have another decision to make. So this is purely direction setting. So just to talk about the whole simplifying local government, the idea, I think, from central government very much is we do have too many layers of local government, and things aren't necessarily, we double up on too many things. Things aren't as clear as they could be. And when we look at things like rate rises, they're not sustainable for our communities. So it's trying to find a better way of doing things. And I think one thing that we've had around this table is a real openness to recognising that something needs to be different. And I've heard that really strongly from our community as well. And if you look at some of the feedback that we've had through our questionnaires, Waitaki in particular was really open to it. And I think it's probably in the environment where we are looking at affordability and rates increases as a council, and our community is hurting. So the idea of us looking for a different way of doing things is really supported. So really want to acknowledge that. Also, and just touching on the Waitaki Irrigators collective submission that they did put in to us, a lot of people talking about the catchment, and the catchment being an absolute non-negotiable for us. Certainly not everyone, but I think for myself that's been a big part of my thinking, because there needs to be a bit more simplicity in what we're doing. For Waitaki, sitting over 2 regional councils has doubled the workload in many spaces. It's doubled the cost in a whole lot of spaces, and it's just made the whole way you go about just your everyday life, if you're having to work in a consenting space or with councils, not simple, not straightforward, and just it's really complex for Waitaki. So whatever we do decide on out of here, I'd like to think that what it's going to end up creating is something a whole lot simpler for our community to use. And that's what we're here for, is for our community and for offering the best service for the best prices that we can in the future for our community. Around the Head Start and backstop, and there's certainly been, and acknowledging some of the feedback we've received on please do not make a decision, please don't rush into this. Do want to acknowledge that, and this is where there is a decision to be made today, because this is complex. The Head Start proposal does allow for people that are non-willing partners. So in that space, there is a risk for us if we don't step into the Head Start space that someone may choose to do up for us. The other risk is if we choose not to step into the Head Start space and we're not on someone else's journey or pulled into someone else's mix, is that our decisions become what's left still to be decided. So in essence, our decisions are taken off the table for us again anyway, and that we're probably going to be left with whatever decision is still sitting on the table available to us. So I think no matter which way we look at it, the only way we can truly actually make a decision and lead our destiny is by setting a direction today. And that's where I'm sitting, but I'm certainly open to councillors and their feedback around that. We've tried through this here to step up in a very short space of time as much community conversation as we could do. So 4 different community meetings that were really well attended. I think there was about 200 people in each, which to get people out in winter is a coup in itself. And it was over 300 people that live streamed that last meeting in Oamaru. And I think that's really great to see. There's a lot of interest out there, and really great to see that despite some of the frustration out in the community, that the conversations were forward facing and they were able to go, if we are looking for something in the future and doing something different, we want the best outcome for Waitaki. I have been working on, and would have got to you all sooner, but we had a bit of an event yesterday. I guess just taking a moment too for those that have been affected by the flooding over the last 2 days, just want to really send our best wishes and heartfelt just support out to those people. I know that any kind of localised event that was at that level that we've dealt with in the last 2 days does a lot of damage in your community, and there's a lot of people hurting. So just want to take a moment to acknowledge and to send our support to those people, and we will be working towards trying to help. We're still sitting in a state of emergency as Waitaki, and we will be in the least until tomorrow when we know what the latest weather event coming through looks like, and that'll come clearer as the day progresses. So that's probably enough from me for now. I will be leading, when we get past this conversation, with a recommendation from the chair, and just to set that scene, because I don't think there's a lot of point us beating around the bush today. My recommendation from the chair will be that we look at joining with northern facing councils as our baseline conversation. So that would be Mackenzie, Waimate and Timaru, and all of those councils are very much open to us being part of that mix. It's leaving the door open to other councils, which will be Ashburton, Central Otago and Clutha, as all being people that we keep the door open to. But I'm very strong on that. As much as I didn't want Waitaki to have their decisions made by anybody else, or what our community would look like moving forward made by anyone else, I don't believe we should be making a decision for any other council. So very much wanting to stay in that willing partner space. But based on that, we will have conversations, but I'll throw to the floor for anyone with just anything at this stage they want to get off their chest, or any questions that they may have. Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Hopkins. I will just get Mr. Palmer to open with his report, and then I'll move to yourself.
Apologies. I won't be long, Councillor Hopkins, I promise. Because I think deliberately in here, in this report you got before you, we haven't recommended an option as officers. We think this is something for you as councillors to decide, but the report outlines the potential options council has in had sort of potential realistic options. We could have gone on forever in terms of looking at different options. And recognises that as a council, we're in an unusual position, being within two regions, and that makes for difficult choices. But in the way we've structured the report, the first decision we think you need to make is around whether you want to be part of that Head Start process or not. And we've had lots of discussions with the community about the pros and cons of that, and the mayor has alluded to that in terms of shaping our own destiny versus waiting to see what that government process looks like, or waiting to see what others do. I wanted to emphasise, if it's not if you select a preferred option today, it's not a final decision. There will be at least one more decision before the 9th of August, but I suspect there'll be other decisions as well as we get into discussions with other councils, or further discussions with other councils. The other thing I was going to emphasise is that there's no perfect options in here. There's none that are going to stand out as that's the one that we have to go for. In the modelling that's been circulated this morning, and apologies, we're working as rapidly as we can with our partners. But in that modelling, it shows that actually from all the amalgamation options, there's not a transformative option in there that's going to deliver massive savings. And from my experience of doing this in a different country, that's been my message from the start. Just amalgamating doesn't suddenly make everything financially fine, and there needs to be thinking about whatever option we go for, how do we transform the system. And I think recognising as well, there's not an option in there that's going to please everyone. In terms of the information you've got, so the first document, the sort of the graphical and pictorial one, is the high level analysis, and that was produced by our team here whilst we were waiting the Morrison Low work to be done. So Joe and the team did some work around that, so that you've got some assessment against the government's criteria and some information as to what those options make up in terms of the size of those councils, the size of the communities, the size of their local economies. This morning it's been loaded up into Docs on Tap, and we'll make sure it goes on the website as well for community and media, is the more detailed analysis by Morrison Low of the Otago option. So that was commissioned by the Otago chief executives in support of the work that the Mayoral Forum was doing. So the South Canterbury options are not in that Morrison Low work. We are looking to get some of that similar analysis, but essentially the message is that the results will likely be broadly the same, and this is what Morrison Low and the other consultancies are finding across the country, that in the different options that they model, the results are similar in terms of where there are savings. In the big scheme of things, they're relatively minor. So when we see that those South Canterbury options model, it's not going to suddenly produce massive savings compared to the Otago options. And then you've got lots of consultation information in there as well, recognising that we were in a hurry. So the first lot is the consultation results from the Otago Mayoral Forum, and I think it's to the credit of the forum that they moved quickly. It was one of the first things they decided to do, was get out there and talk to the community and find out community views. And then the latest community consultation results from the survey of the past 2 weeks. And again, we were doing that in a hurry, acknowledging there was an error in one of the questions there, or in the ability to answer around keeping the Waitaki together, but nevertheless, a good snapshot of those people who are interested in there. So in the short space of time, we've tried to put a base of information together that enables you to have a good understanding of what the options are, but also some understanding of community sentiment out there for the different options.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Look, I've got a question for you, Mel, and also one for Paul at this stage. The question for you is, how do we intend to respond to what Empty Buckets refers to as a formal notice? I don't believe that it is, given the use of the word formal when they request a referendum or a vote. But I just wonder how we're going to respond to that. And Paul,
I'll take one question at a time.
Okay.
Councillor Hopkins. So I guess there's a lot of people with a lot of views on things, and we certainly are taking on board those views, and especially around the making a decision and whether or not we have a mandate, which we do not, to make this decision. This is the same issue that's being grappled with by every council across the country as they look at this. So it's not unique to us. The government have very much put us in this situation. When it comes to a referendum, there's a huge cost in that, and the timeframes mean that we will be taken out of the Head Start process and we'll be part of the backstop. So then it does take those decisions off the table for us as to whether or not parts of their community, either north or south, move into the Head Start process. It also takes options off the table for us. So there's an absolute risk to our community in that. I'm absolutely happy to go back to the empty buckets space, but I guess their response and their petition has not been in the space of the future for local government. And I think there's got to be an acknowledgement through here. And the reason we're looking at the cost increases, and they're going to continue when it comes to things like providing our water services, that looking at doing something different is really important. And it's important for us as a council to get as much support in this space, because we have a huge amount on our plate around spatial planning and stuff that we're going to be stepping up in 2 districts. So to sit there on the fence and not make a decision for another 2.5 years or whatever that sits like is going to actually do our council and our community a whole lot of damage and cost us a whole lot for the sake of it. So I think there's a space in here that, while I acknowledge that we do not have the mandate and no council in the country does, we also probably have a requirement for our community to show leadership in this space, because that's what's being asked of us, and to try and make the best decisions we can in the timeframes we've been given with the information we have at hand that's going to potentially cost our community the least possible and provide the best opportunities for a long-term outcome for us. So that's where I'm sitting on it. I don't believe that I can offer any more than that. And I think the communication for our community from here on in is part of how we manage this moving forward. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, the government has set the timetable on this, not not the councils, and so we need to work to that, and it being practical to, we just couldn't simply arrange a poll or a referendum in that space of time. But we've put in the report that we need to give consideration as to how we continue to engage the community throughout this process. And I talked about this at some of the community events. This is not a once and done, and if we go ahead and submit a Head Start proposal, and if it is selected by the government, and there's 2 ifs in there, then there will still be a process to go through in terms of working out that proposal, and community consultation and engagement will be important throughout that. And so we've alluded to that in the report, that we need to keep considering that at every stage in terms of how do we continue to engage the community in this process. The government's been very specific that it doesn't want to see polls or referenda being held across the country on different options, but ultimately that might be something that councils wish to consider for themselves later on in the process, but simply not practical to do something ahead of the Head Start deadline set by the government.
So back to you, Councillor.
no, thank you. I appreciate the answers, and I basically agree with you in terms of the practicality or achievability of a referendum at this stage. And I think it is important that everyone acknowledge that we're working through a time frame decreed by Wellington and not one that we have opted for ourselves. Paul, if I could just ask you on page 7, now this might seem to be a footling point, and if it is, I apologise. But you say councils choosing to participate in the Head Start pathway must submit an outline proposal to Cabinet. But just to be clear, because I've seen some other councils with various alternatives or a range of options, which they have at least published as a range. Now, whether they intend to take that range to Wellington or just select one from it, I don't know. But is it in fact government's expectation that from each council will only come one outline proposal? It's certainly my understanding of the position. The mayor looks like she wants to contribute. I don't think, I think there needs to be essentially one per council. However, there seems to be also guidance coming out of DIA that it's like, we don't have an absolute concrete proposal, but here's a direction we're working on. But I don't think you can sort of come up, well, we're looking at this, and we're still looking at this. I think that would almost be worse than nothing at all.
Yeah, I think that's dead right. Essentially, councils don't have to put anything in at all. So there's that as well. So at the moment, the ones that want to step into the Head Start proposal will put a proposal in. It won't be for many councils. What they've said, and I think this is probably really pertinent to us, is that they want to know what your council's decision is, not what your range of options are. That being said, and this is part of my recommendation that we'll talk to a bit later on, is that can mean there's still some questions around boundaries. So you want to know where your community is going, but if you've got more work to do on boundaries or anything like that, and feel like that hasn't been teased out enough, which is probably the case for us, then that can be part, as long as you are making an overall decision for your council, the ability to continue to do some work with your community and other councils on boundaries is still there. So that's where the options come into play, but that option for them is not, hey, we could be either in this space or in this space. As a council, that won't cut it.
Thanks.
Councillor Strong.
Just want to check with you because in the meeting last night, the webinar or whatever you want to call it, I took from comments made by the mayor of Central Otago, Tama Ali, that she had actually been in contact with the DIA, and the DIA had agreed that what Central Otago is simply going to send a letter to DIA in response of all this. And if I got this wrong, then I'm happy to be corrected. And basically saying, look, we are not going to the Head Start, we are not going for the backstop. We simply are still trying to make our minds up and gathering information. So is that something, well, basically, I'd like to get your opinion, view, and Mr. Palmer's view on that approach to the whole Head Start program.
So you did right. So that's been part of the conversations that have been had at the Otago Mural Forum, which DIA, which is now MCERT from 1st of July, have fed into. So essentially the feedback was, and I think the conversation is fair to say around the Otago Mural Forum was, there wasn't feeling a readiness to move into the Head Start space. So there was a bit more work to do, a number of them wanted to do. The feedback on that one from MCERT is, if you don't want to be landed fairly in the backstop, there may be that kind of foot in the door and telling them what you're doing and telling them your timeframes, because there is things like when the paper comes to cabinet, there may be some stopgaps in there where the 9th of August isn't an absolute deadline. I guess reason why we're still here today and the timeframes we're sitting in is a lot of other council decisions are based on our decisions. So what we decide or don't decide today will really feed into their processes. And so if we don't make a decision, then a lot of other decisions are going to be on hold as well. So there's a problem in that. But certainly one of the risks we have at play is looking north of us, that a Head Start proposal will be being put in by councils north of us. It's still arguable whether that would be including us or not including us. I'd say that debate needs to be had by many councils. But there is certainly a willingness for us to be at the table, and we've sort of very much just said, hey, we want to be able to make this decision for our community, not have it made for us. In the Otago space, even if we did make a decision looking south, I do not believe that we would be in a position to head into the Head Start proposal space. But perhaps a foot in the door. Did you want to add anything to that, Alan?
Couple of things I'll add to that. So we just need to be careful that the guidance and what the minister has announced, or ministers have announced, is quite clear. There's a Head Start, of which the deadline is 9th of August, and then there's a backstop. I've speculated before that, if there was a group of councils that had, got their act together but weren't quite there in terms of being ready for the Head Start, that the government, might be open to that. And that was the conversations that, have been had with government officials. So this hasn't come from ministers, it's come from government officials. But it's not a recipe for delaying things. It's a bit of leeway. And if we were going to do that, it's I think the term letter might be a bit understating what would be required. It need to be some sort of commitment from those councils and setting out a plan and a timetable of what they were going to do, and concrete actions to develop their proposal to a point where they were ready. And it wouldn't be an open-ended timetable. It'd be in quick time after the Head Start deadline that these proposals come in, so that to try and meet those government decision-making timetables. So I think we just need to be clear. It's not a recipe for being able to delay and not get into the backstop process. There'd need to be some basis and some commitment from councils towards that direction that was being set.
Take all that on board and thank you. I'm also conscious a lot of people online and maybe here that haven't followed the discussions last night. But I think it's also important to point out that the impression I got, again, that is my personal impression, is that other councils, the other districts around us, are now basically waiting on Waitaki to make a decision. Whilst when we started this, the question was, well, do they actually want Waitaki? And then if you look at all the population numbers, then I think it becomes very clear. I do believe, though, that as we are not operating under standing instructions, I do believe, though, is that the sitting on the fence by other councils, I should say, other districts, actually makes things very difficult for us and quite vague. And I actually am disappointed in that, and that's my personal opinion, particularly because I represent Waihimo, who is another curveball in this whole discussion. So, yeah, I think that is somewhat disappointing that districts around us that we could very easily, or not very easily, but would suit Waitaki, I believe, as a district, are basically not coming across and making a decision or even a preference. So, yeah, I just wonder where I'm leading with this is that I think we should leave the door open for other districts other than just the northern option. And I think a lot will depend on the submission that we make and the wording in that. And I would strongly request to you, Mayor Taverdale and Mr. Palmley, is that you keep us closely engaged with how that submission is worded, because I think that is going to be extremely important for the future. This is not a minor decision. This is a mega one. So, yeah, that request I just wanted to have put on record. Thank you.
Absolutely agree, Councillor Slake. And I guess just in my conversations looking at councils all around us, the door has remained open to all of them. While some of them aren't ready to make a decision, they certainly are welcoming to Waitaki being part of that mix. But there is, you're right, a lot that are sort of waiting for Waitaki to set a direction because it does have a direct impact on their decisions. Deputy Mayor Ryan.
Thank you. And I guess just sort of naturally flowing on from some of Councillor Schlack's points, I was just, I have a couple of questions. And the first one is around, I guess, if we are to take this step today, what this next month kind of looks like in terms of developing a proposal, because, I understand we obviously have to put forward a proposal for this, like for example, South Canterbury option. There's very limited time for every council within that option to agree exactly, what that final proposal looks like. So what opportunities there are for us to be talking about, like the situations that are unique to us, the Otago kind of connections. I'm very conscious of timelines and wanting our voice to be very strongly heard, even if, the timelines don't allow for exactly, for us to be even agreeing on exactly everything that we want to be included in that. That's question number one. I don't know who to.
I guess not wanting to preempt any decision, but certainly we need to be straight back to the table and starting to build what that looks like. There will be a few decision points for council as well, and built into my recommendation is basically giving Alex the ability to go away and start the work, but touch points with yourself and me so that we've got some people available on the ground. But I believe that wherever possible, we need to get that up to the entire lot of councillors. Also in part of my recommendation, which we might put that up for a wee bit just so that we know what we're talking about, because I think that's helpful, because it possibly needs a bit of wordsmithing and a bit of work as a team. It's really my first ditch effort at trying to get my thoughts onto paper. So just to read that out, Waitaki District Council, number 1, resolves that we develop a proposal for the district to be amalgamated into a new unitary council under the government's Simplifying Local Government Head Start program. So that's essentially saying we will head into the Head Start. Number 2, the proposal will include the whole of the Waitaki district within its current boundaries. Now, I just want to asterisk that a wee touch, that further down I do expand on that a wee touch. Number 3, the preferred new unitary council will include the districts of Waimati, Mackenzie, Timaru and Waitaki. Number 4, the proposed new unitary council could additionally include, this is the keeping the door open part of things, Ashburton District, Clutha District and Central Otago District, should these councils agree to this option. Number 5, notwithstanding the above, exploration of options in the southern parts of Waitaki District, being the Waihemo, continue along with including other Otago councils. So the reason I've got that in this space is I don't think we've got a clear steer in that. We also had a wee bit of, the questionnaire wasn't as clear as it could be. So I just feel like we need to tease it out and do that community justice and really hear their voice a bit more. So one thing that the DIA or MCERT have said to us, that they are comfortable to keep working on boundaries to say you're not quite there yet. And while I think as a starting point, we have Waitaki District within its current boundaries, I do think we need to keep working with the Waihemo District to make sure that is what predominantly that community want. And if it's not, I think we need to tease out what that looks like. And there's certainly an openness looking south for some of those conversations to be had. So the number 6, request the Chief Executive in consultation with the Mayor and Deputy Mayor to help to develop a Head Start program in conjunction with partner councils to be brought back to Council for approval 9th of August, ahead of 9th of August, sorry. So that's essentially just keeping elected members in the loop. While I've got myself and the Deputy Mayor in the mix there, just to name some, I think it also, for me, it's involving keeping councillors at the table and across the detail, which I think is really important. Number 7, request the Chief Executive in consultation with the Mayor develop a proposal for a focus group, including iwi and identified community leaders, to inform the detailed design of the future unitary authority to be brought back to Council for agreement. So essentially that's me saying I want to have a touch point in our community to really build as much knowledge into this as we can, and to, when we're entering discussions as a grouping from here on and working on the detail, that we're meeting before that, we're really working on what our fundamentals are, and we're trying to get the best outcome for Waitaki. So it's not just my voice at the table, but we're really delving into some of the expertise we have as a community. And then finally, request the Chief Executive in consultation with the Mayor and Deputy Mayor develops a communications and engagement plan to keep our community informed and involved in this process. And to be fair, I do think, and as much as there's a lot of work involved in them, I do think the community meetings has been a really useful tool in this as well, to actually be able to have our community asking all the things they want to know and have a open conversation. So that's something I'd love to see in that mix, but we can spend a bit of time on that in the future. It's really just to get in there that we do, this is the start of a conversation again, and we need to keep talking right the way through this and giving our community a chance to feed in. So that's where I'm sitting for a starting point. We'll leave that up on the screen and saying that I still need to see my people on the screen, but so that we can talk to that if we want to as well. And wordsmithing is absolutely welcome. Did that answer your questions, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, in some parts. No, I guess just wanting to make sure that, I mean, yeah, with the timelines in front of us, that we're not going to be sort of, you know, that we're still going to have an opportunity to be feeding in our own thoughts if this is the path that we take into whatever goes forward, rather than just like a, you know, a full council, because yeah, that's sort of where I was wanting to get some clarity on.
Absolutely, we need to I don't want this process led by any individual council. I think this process needs to be built by or whoever's at the table needs to be part of building this here, and we need to make it as wide as we can. Alex.
I was just going to add a caution that obviously we want to work on that, but we've got 4 weeks from today. And the more councils we've got around the table, the more challenging this will be. I mentioned previously when I've done this work, we took 6 months to develop the full business case and engage councils and communities in that. We haven't got that. So we're going to have to move at pace. It's not the full detailed proposal that we need to develop, but we need a good outline and start to set the foundations for that detailed proposal. But we can build into the timetable those regular engagements and put a space within our docs on tap in terms of all that information that's coming out of there, so that you've got visibility of what's being discussed. But we're going to have to move quickly, and that will be challenging with many voices around the table.
It's probably those kind of weekly touch points like I've had with the Otago Mural Forum, and it's just been online in the evening, an hour a week, just to kind of bring everyone back together and just to deal with everything we've got going on, and then you can go back out into your councils and do those discussions. So it's not a perfect system, but it's standing up what we can in the short process. Councillor Fowling.
Are you taking any amendments to this now ahead of going back into standing orders, or would you like us to wait till?
I guess when it comes to the formalities part of it, I'll happy to, but if you want to let me know what you're thinking at the moment, I'm happy to sort of see how we build something like that.
Yeah, I actually thought it was really good. The only thing I'd add in, just purely because we need to start thinking like a regional council.
Yeah,
I would add in number 7, I'd change it to read, requests the chief executive in consultation with the mayor develop proposal for a focus group including iwi and identified a community, and then I'd insert and rural leaders, and then leave the rest the same to inform the detailed design, because I think we need to specify that, because the vast majority of our district by area is rural, and that's what's going to be regulated in its entirety from all the regional council current functions and under the new planning system in the future, which I've got a lot more thoughts on. I'll talk about later.
You certainly have no issue with that addition. It was an intention of that anyway, so happy for that to be identified. Was that all you had, Councillor Fowling? Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, I would probably also want to amend 5 in what I think is a non-contentious way, so that it would read, notwithstanding the above, exploration of options for the southern parts of the Waitaki district, being all or part of the Waihemo ward.
I'm happy with that. That brings the intent. Basically, I just want the conversation to continue on, and yeah, that way we've got time in that space to do that well. Councillor Schlack and then Deputy Mayor Ryan.
Yeah, I realise the Waihemo ward is specifically mentioned there, but in the end it comes back to how you draw the boundaries up. Because if you take the formal Waitaki River catchment as a boundary, then it's not only Waihemo that actually then gets separated from Waitaki. It's basically, roughly speaking, anything south of the Waitaki floodplain. But I think it all depends how you word the actual submission in the end. On 6, I understand that it's got to be a group key people that have to lead this and develop a head start proposal with other partner councils. And Mr. Barney said 4 weeks. You haven't got 4 weeks. 9th of August is a Sunday. So I have no problem having a an extraordinary council meeting on a Saturday afternoon, but I'm pretty sure others might not agree with me. So in fact, we've got, what have we got, 3 weeks, if that, if we want to do it on a Tuesday. I just want to emphasise the point of communication with other councillors, that's all. I don't want to have on a Monday afternoon, have an email and said, oh, by the way, this is what you're going to decide on tomorrow morning, because that's not going to fly. I will just go no, I will go no again. We need to have that communication with other councillors. So I just want to emphasise the point. I don't know how you're going to wordsmith in that, because I do recognise there's got to be some key people leading this. But I think the message is clear. You got to communicate in the next 3 weeks, regardless of where we are in the world, and seek our feedback in that 3 weeks. Don't leave it until the Monday before the Tuesday of the extraordinary council meeting.
I absolutely agree, Councillor Schleck, and I'm open to whether or not that stays in there like that. I guess for giving a bit of direction for the Chief Executive, it's saying that the buck stops when it comes to things with the Mayor and Deputy Mayor. But then I do believe that there absolutely needs to be councillors kept in the loop around what's going in and what we're doing, because we've got some amazingly detail-orientated councillors at the table, yourself being one of them, whose input I value. So I would be crazy to not have your input part of that conversation.
If I can just add to that, is that it's also about sharing the responsibility. You know, it's not the responsibility of you as mayor and Alex as chief executive. This is a decision we are going to make as a council. It's sharing the responsibility, and to me, that's very important in all these decisions.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Councillor Cowles. Councillor Slack, I'm thinking ahead to the next. Deputy Mayor Ryan and then Councillor Cowles.
Thank you. It came up in conversation maybe last week by Councillor Fanini Taiti, and it is something that keeps coming up in conversations that I'm having in the community, is what, and I guess it's because of probably the unique position that Waitaki's in terms of being across 2 regions, that perhaps that's where there hasn't been a lot of conversation nationally about it. But, you know, if we're thinking broader than local government, if we're looking at, you know, where we sit in terms of being part of the health system, police, emergency services and other agencies, and I guess it kind of got me thinking, you know, this week with a state of emergency and dealing with, you know, our Otago colleagues on that, you know, I just feel like there's probably broader impacts here that haven't been thought about. And even, you know, like in my own work with Sport Otago, you know, seeing how interconnected all the systems are and where people sit, and, you know, for our high schools, for our regional sports organisations, things like that. And has there been any more thinking on that or discussion, I guess, on this decision that we are making today, and potentially, you know, there's so many unknowns with this whole conversation, but has there been any more thinking on that or the impacts there? Because that's just something that kind of keeps sitting with me.
I'll go to you shortly, Alex, but yes and no. I guess in a formal sense, we haven't gone a long way down that track. I think if you think of things like in the sporting sense, and we've talked about, you know, the fact that we're already in no man's land. Some of our high school teams are looking south, some of them look north. Some of them aren't welcome to certain competitions because they're supposed to be another competition, and they're not welcome there either. So I think out of this here, we really do need to land in one area and be really clear on where our boundaries lie. There is a mixed bag of boundaries in central government systems that we're already dealing with, and a lot of it does look south, and there is a risk there. I would love to think at the end of this, if we get something that's working, that we then can be in conversation with central government about being really clear on what our boundaries are for their services looking nationally. That's not the case at the moment. So it will be a messy mixed bag as we've been. And I probably can't promise anything different to that because it's a little bit out of our control. But I do think that there is a part B to this, that when we do all land in unitary authorities that make sense and are working together, then we need to have central government looking to those conversations and showing how they're actually making things simpler as well in their systems, so they line up with our systems, and there's a bit of clarity on borders. It's not helpful, but yeah, that's all I can give you, Alex.
So I'd say that's on a long list of things that we need to be worked through for the detailed proposal. We're not going to sort that for the Head Start proposal. But I take it back to what I said previously, that amalgamation is not enough to deal with the challenges that local government and our communities face. It needs some more radical thinking, and that thinking needs to come from a system perspective, and where does local government fit within the system, and how that impacts on our communities and our district. And I think that we need to push hard that thinking is in the detailed design, that we're not just pulling together a group of councils that are going to operate in a very traditional way. We're going to look at how we overhaul the approach and the way that local councils work, so that they're much more better integrated with the rest of the system, and that will mean that we might have things within that detailed proposals that we ask of government as well. Because we can't keep on operating within different regional boundaries for different things. It adds complexity, it adds cost, it adds confusion. And if this is about simplifying things, then we need to be able to resolve that through that process, which will need government to do things as well. And the message we've got very clearly is that government is open to changing things. There will need to be primary legislation to enable the new arrangements, and that's a huge opportunity. If there's new legislation, if we're not having to fit into an existing legislative framework, then that opens up massive opportunities to really change the system up so it works better for our communities.
Yeah. Councillor Cowles.
Thank you. Yeah, look, I wasn't going to have that discussion, but it's raised a really good point that I would tend to agree. I actually see that as an opportunity, and whilst for all of us today, this is a very uncomfortable, pressured style of decision. We've got an opportunity here to be working with similar communities that will be facing similar challenges, particularly smaller rural communities, rural health, and those sorts of things. And when like minds come together, we tend to have better outcomes, I would like to think. So if I can just quickly have a bit of a chat about the motion today, I'm generally supportive of it. I think there's a little bit of a risk with points 2 and 5. They for me seem to contradict each other in some way, and I would wonder if we should have something in the wording around, and I'm happy to do this further down, but should the whole of the district approach and 2 not prove achievable, council will explore options for the Waiheme ward, including with Otago councils. So we're not saying we're doing both in parallel. It's a one or the other, because I don't think we can support both moving forward. So that would be my first point on that.
If I can just respond to that one first, Councillor Cowles. I get what you're saying there, but what I want to, it's not saying that if it's not achievable, we don't do this. What it's saying is, I don't feel like we've really got a clear steer from the community on that particular issue, and there's still just a bit of uncertainty around it. So trying to say, and I think it could be, I was playing around with wording on this one, I'm not sure we've quite got it right yet, but that our intention is all of Waitaki, but there is a bit of a grey area, if you will, that I think needs more conversation. So I didn't want to say that if it's not achievable, we go and plan in direction B. I think we're setting 90% of a direction here, with a little bit of a, we've just got a wee bit more work to do in that space. And I think that the government are open for us to do that at some stage. And I think in the near future, rather than the longer future, we need to then make a decision around that and land it. So all it's saying is that we're mostly making a decision here, but there's a little bit still up for conversation.
Cool. It might just be in that wordsmithing there, and that's fine. Happy and comfortable with that. My second one is around our local voice and making sure that we have a safeguard. I know there's, if we look around, there's plenty of information out there floating around about us being up for grabs and carving us up for, rather than what's best for our community for political or resource reasons. And I just wonder whether we should be a little bit more direct about having local voice safeguard, and something along the lines of the proposal will seek strong local governance and representation arrangements, such as local community boards, and ensure rural and ward level voice. So I guess for me, that's, if I look at our representation up here, we've had to go back to fight and change boundaries to keep our local representation in the Ahuriri. And I'd really like to protect that we still have some of those sort of local voices that are really important feeding in. And I think, as we're going into a larger authority, I think we still have to somehow look at setting a preference for making sure we've got local voice. So I'm just wondering whether we could include something like that. And I guess my third point is really about the catchment. Around the Waitaki River, if we look moving north, whilst that may work out fine, if surrounding councils had different ideas, I'm wondering something along to be really clear about how important the Waitaki is. The proposal will address integrated management of the Waitaki River catchment, including consideration of a Waitaki River Authority mechanism where full catchment alignment is not achieved through amalgamation. So if this wasn't to play out the way we hope it does, we're still wondering whether we include something in there to ensure that we have got an option to make sure that Waitaki River is highly protected, as we've heard from our community. So I guess they're my 3 points that.
So I think you're right. If we look at wordsmithing number 2, and then if we add a number 8, and I might work with you on how we word that around just clarifying around the local voice and safeguarding both the rural voice and local representation. So I think something along that line, just to be really clear in direction setting for staff, and also just one on the catchment there as number 10. Alex, do you have a...
Yeah, I was going to say we did recommend in the officer recommendations that you agree some criteria important to Waitaki to inform the development. I think that's helpful. If we could agree some criteria as part of the resolution, rather than a long list of resolution, maybe capture it under one. My caution would be to offer it as guidance, recognising that we're going to have a group of other councils to work with. So try not to bind too tight so we've got space to maneuver, but get a clear statement of what's really important to us that we can then take into those discussions, and we'll try and get clarity on what's important to those other councils as well when we first engage.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just think today is an opportunity for us to have some of that. I guess they're not non-negotiables, because the whole point of this is a negotiation, but a really clear starting point. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. So we'll work on that when we come to the conversation. Councillor Fanini-Titi.
Thank you through the chair. I think it was just as a follow-up to the Deputy Mayor's comment and our CEO. And I think on the face of it, I know that it needs to be included as part of the detailed plan, but I'm just encouraging us to kind of not isolate it as a think about it later kind of aspect. The public service sector is going through a huge reform as well. And then as local government is going through our own reform, we don't want to miss things unintentionally. So I'm just really mindful in terms of to some of the papers and the attachments that we've received in terms of what is key infrastructure, what matters to the community. The social infrastructure is still quite important. I know that you're aware of. So yeah, a lot of the alignment for us, it sits in the Otago around education, around health, around primary health care, and other social services. But it's just to keep that in mind if there is the option and consideration for going the other way, that we don't have the unintended consequence of missing what is working quite well, but just taking it into consideration is what I'm just encouraging us.
Yeah, and I think we can, along with that kind of local voice, local representation, and the safeguarding of catchment, that can probably one of the criteria that we specify through our motions. I think that's really important. Councillor McCone, and then Councillor Hopkins.
I think that what's up on the screen really sums up where we're at the moment with the information we've had, what's been going on, and what's really coming on the next, or what has come on the last 3 or 4 days. I have the biggest concern. Well, firstly, the direction we've had from those meetings is pretty much what we've got up there. My biggest concern is we're the ham and the sandwich on both sides that have a very useful asset, which is the Waitaki River. And our people have made it very clear, our ratepayers have made it very clear that the Waitaki district as a whole is the only option we've got. And I totally agree with that. The Waitaki is unique and it works well together with everything else. We don't really have a choice not to be part of Head Start, because we could just be gobbled up and, as they say, we will be on the menu if we're not at the table. And I don't think that's an option. I think also that the devil will be in the detail. This is actually an indication of where we're going to go, and the government will make that decision of whether it's acceptable or not to them. It's how we set that detail down, and I think the likes of number 7 up there covers that off very quickly, because I think that's huge in the way that it should be set up. I also think that on a positive side is a huge opportunity. The government talks about reform of local government and the systems. And I think if you get it right at the start, that is a very big opportunity to actually change and restructure those systems so they're far more user-friendly. As far as crossing social service and everything else, that's a biggie, and I'm not quite sure how we tackle that. But at the minute, that could be done in the detail further down the track. But I think right at the minute, we've got, as Fran says, 21 days left, and we've got to give an indication, otherwise that indication will be given for us.
And I think the meat and the sandwich discussion, and you're right, but there's also an opportunity in that. And I think it is whatever unitary we do land on, we've got really strong ties because we've sat across 2 regions to actually bring those conversations together and to have some cross-unitary actions at play as well. Because I think some of the, especially the regional council functions, are best delivered at a much bigger kind of geographical area, so that's probably sitting in the science area and in the river management. And so I think we really need to pull in those relationships we've built to have some cross-unitary conversations going on too, which I do think deals with some of the scale issues we're still going to be looking at.
No, look, I totally agree, and I think there's 2 things that we've got to keep the door open for the rest of our neighbours, but at the end of the day, if we wait for them, we might get shut out of the door. So we've got to go. And secondly, we're working with the known facts and not the unknown facts right at the minute, and I think that's really what we've got to focus on given the time frames.
Yeah. Councillor Hopkins.
Look, it's arguably a matter that's past in terms of its pertinence, but I'd be interested in officers' comments. Rebecca mentioned the Port Otago shares, and I would have thought that the Crown's probably going to rely on the 1989 precedents, which actually, well, certainly in Canterbury, distributed the shareholding to all the councils that had constituted or had been involved and had been created through the 89 reforms. And as I understand it here, all the shares reside with the regional council. At least that's the impression I've gained from some of the debate. So clearly there was a distinction here, but with the regional council disappearing, I would have thought that they're going to allocate shares on a percentage basis predicated on who's been involved up until 2028, which would, as I say, replicate the 1989 solution. But I wonder if Alex and officers have given this matter any thought or sought any advice on it.
Given it some thought, not sought any advice on it. Again, that's something that's in the detail, but if you did resolve to be in an arrangement that's, and ended up in an arrangement with other councils that's not part of Otago, we'd need to make sure that, our residents didn't lose out on that. So, that is, the ports and its property holding company is an Otago residence asset. So that would be part of the discussions and one of those detail points that we need to resolve.
Just very quickly, the flip side of that is picking up on points that Brent's referenced, local voice, other matters, the possibility of a backup solution to the river. I wonder if we also need possibly to make a passing reference to debt. Because clearly last night in that webinar, it was an issue that seemed to be uppermost in the minds of at least some of the councillors from other councils. And the notion that debt would be at least initially ring-fenced, or that some collective agreement between participating councils would determine consequences, does, I think, to some extent allay anxieties, but it might be worth incorporating that as one of the issues that we deem to be important for the Crown to consider and propose some approach towards.
Well, I think that's going to have to come in the detail, because if we're asking for something in the debt space, we've got to understand what the implications for our own ratepayers are. And I don't think that we're there when it comes to any of these mixes yet. So it's absolutely going to need to be dealt with through the detail of this, and that's where we come to the table and we fight for what benefits our community the most. But we don't have a clear understanding. So I think to try and send direction to staff in the space of debt at the moment would just be problematic.
I'm not really, I agree with you, absolutely. And I'm not proposing a formula. I'm simply suggesting that perhaps we acknowledge that debt is an issue that all parties need to consider as they develop the detail of these proposals.
I think we can certainly do that in our correspondence.
Okay.
I think that will cover that off. Councillor Lewis, then Deputy Mayor Ryan, then Councillor Schlack. Unless Paul wants to, add something first. Sorry, I'll just stop you for a second, Councillor Lewis.
No, I think it's, the degree of unwinding if the decision is made to move north is, the more we look at it, the more we'll find. Two things that immediately sprung to my mind, in addition to Port Otago, are we make a contribution to the stadium in Dunedin as part of through the regional council, and we also have things like the compulsory levy paid to the Otago Museum that's set up through its Empowering Act. So I mean, it's like the more you get into it, the more you'll find all of these things that have pluses and minuses in terms of what's the best solution, and which communities are we really part of. So it's as noted, it's not only it's social services, but there's a whole lot of other things that we're entwined and would need to be either acknowledged, unwound, or accepted as they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Lewis.
So Marty, I'm sorry I can't be with you in person this morning, but just actually I've got some thoughts, which is unsurprising, and also a question as well. And one of the things that Paul's just actually said was something that was on my mind, is how we would go with regards to Otago if we did move north, unwinding some of those connections and contributions that have been historical for so many years. First question I do have is, it's on page 15 of our agenda, and it's probably directed at Jo, I believe, if she's been the one who's done a lot of this work. It's with regards to the Otago Region Unitary, and it's the scoring of it, the deliverability is set down as 2. And I just had a question first up as to why 2?
So really the only thing that I can offer you, Councillor Lewis, is that the measures against all of these were taken from the Head Start documentation available from the government. And so the expectations around delivery were set up in the background and actually laid over each of these options. And this came out at 2 against those measures. So all of them are scored in exactly the same way. So it gives you that scale up to 5 of which ones are the most deliverable options and the difficulties of others based upon the information that we have.
Thank you. I just sort of wonder, in part, is that because some others haven't made their decision as to which way they want to go, or whether they would actually be part of the Head Start, and therefore that actually would skew that figure?
One of the individuals that was part of the team has sent me a message to say, in addition, that proposals are realistic and demonstrate how new arrangements can be implemented in a timely manner.
That's that one answered. Thank you very much. Some thoughts that I have. It's an interesting one. I mean, I think I'm wondering when, as a country, we realise that we're not as big as we think we are. And what I mean is one of the common things I say is often is that we're the size of Melbourne or the size of Sydney as a country. I mean, the entity which would probably make the most sense realistically is an entire South Island unitary authority. If you look at population, its services are delivered by people and they're also paid for by people. And unfortunately, it doesn't matter how large the area, which is one of the challenges we face, we still have to have people paying for it. And I think that there's got to be an economy of scale, which is where I have some concerns with regards to just going north without a larger metro population base included in that. And the reason for that is that it is an economies of scale issue for me. But I'm concerned if we're all rural provincial, we don't really gain the benefits. We just have a larger area with a fewer number of people to pay for more of the same. The Waitaki River has obviously been a dominant factor in our discussions with regards to the public meetings. It's been very much at the forefront, and it is a very important consideration. The challenge is making sure it's not like a child in a three-way custody battle, which it sort of kind of feels like it is, because everybody, Mackenzie, Waimati, and ourselves have a realistic claim over that. And I think the challenge is going forward whether where we land with regards to working is actually better dealt with by a Waitaki River authority that actually deals with that. It's who our better partners are with regards to all the other things that we do. And I think that is something that sort of is sitting on my mind at the moment. I mean, clearly the history and the challenges that have been faced between different applications of rules, because theoretically everybody's running to the same thing, between ECAN and ORC is not sustainable. It doesn't make any sense. It's anti-productive, really. And I think that certainly needs to be addressed. And I don't think anybody would question the reality of that part of it. But is the right way forward? Are we basing our primary decision on the Waitaki and how we deal with that? And is that the dominant factor? Could that be handled in a better way or in a different way that is actually fair and equitable to everybody? So, yeah, I'll just leave that there I'll just park that one there. But those are my sort of thoughts on this at this stage. Obviously I'm supportive. I believe that we need to be part of the Head Start. I don't feel that we have any option. As has been said repeatedly, the time frame is less than ideal. And I think that unfortunately, if we don't elect to be part of it and take it into, and opt to go into a backstop, we become a plaything really potentially for anybody else, and that's not healthy for our community. We need to actually have a voice and a say. So I'm supportive of being in there. I just have my reservations as to it shouldn't be a binary choice. It shouldn't be north or south, frankly. It should be, anyway, I'll leave it there.
I'm hearing you, Councillor Lewis, and I guess you are welcome to, and I know that Dunedin for you is one of your thoughts around getting that quantity of scale, which there is certainly an argument for that. And I think, for us, having Ashburton in the mix makes a real difference, not a difference to the level of Dunedin, but certainly a difference. But I certainly don't think that we should be pushing that. That's a decision for Ashburton to make. You are welcome to move an extra one around the Otago on top of this if you want to. I'd say a lot of the feedback I've seen online and in person has been either really pro that or very, very against that. So we can see how it goes. Like that, I think that that's got to be part of the conversation today. I'm going to take Councillor Hopkins, Deputy Mayor Ryan, then Councillor Schleck and Thowning, and that will be the end before I put something so that we go into standing orders, because we're going to run out of time otherwise. So Councillor Hopkins.
Look, I think it's really important for everyone, including the community, to understand that the solution is not whether we have an authority or not. And I think Brent's suggestion that that be incorporated as an option, one of the issues that we might wish to contemplate, is the right approach. Because if you think about this, however the Waitaki River is managed, it will be managed in terms of the stipulations and prescriptions of the two new planning acts. And it won't change whether that's done by councils or by an authority. And in point of fact, what we are talking about, if it is agreed to, will be the establishment of a single unitary authority with a geographical boundary south of the river and north of the river and east and west as well. That unitary authority will administer the rules regarding the river in terms of the expectations of the Crown that that administration will reinforce and implement the provisions of the new acts. So it's really important that we understand, in my view, that the first thing that we should try to do is maintain local control through the development of spatial plans and the development of the unitary plan that would arise as a result of our participation in that new council. To cede that to an authority and relinquish all ability to implement or influence would, in my view, as an initial proposition, be unwise. So I think it's really important, and I note Sven is nodding, so I suspect that there is consensus as to the planning analysis that I've suggested. I think it's really important that we actually, in protection of the local voice, take the position that as a first solution, a single unitary authority where we would help to frame the rules would be the optimum solution.
Deputy Mayor Ryan.
Thank you. I actually had my hand up earlier to sort of to pick up on Councillor Cowell's point about local voice, and now Councillor Hopkins has added to that as well. And I guess how that could be wordsmithed in. And it is one of the themes that's come through in a lot of these discussions about protecting local voice because of concerns, I guess, about what any bigger structure might look like. But we had a really interesting conversation last week at the Simplifying Local Government Summit in Canterbury around what is local voice. Should we be preserving what we've got, or do we actually need to be starting to think about how we improve that? Because, so I guess I'd be a bit cautious about being too prescriptive about what that looks like, because if we think about local voice right now, half of eligible voters don't actually participate in elections. We know there's groups and communities that we're not engaging with. And I mean, look at the breakdown of the responses that we've had in this survey, you know, to who has actually engaged. And we've got situations here where we've got 6 Waimatu councillors voting on rural matters with the same weighting as our rural colleagues, and varying levels of sort of knowledge, experience, connections to the sector. So yeah, I guess how do we, you know, we've got an opportunity here to redesign governance that actually genuinely reflects our communities and catchments, and making sure people feel represented and heard, rather than sort of restrict ourselves to a certain model. And, you know, we can be looking at how we're bridging that urban rural gap rather than kind of reinforcing it. So that would just be, I guess, my caution around being too prescriptive in what local voice actually means, because I think this is really exciting opportunity that we've got in this conversation to totally reshape that.
Councillor Schlack.
Thank you, Mayor Taverdale. A couple of things that I've put from myself in the last couple of weeks, a number of key parameters that I think should be taken in consideration. There's been a lot of talk, and one of them is about rivers and their catchments. So I know there's been a lot of talk about the Waitaki River, and I completely agree with that it should be under the control or management of one authority. However, can we also keep in mind, and I would request that that is also part of the proposal, that that applies to every river. As I've shared with you last week, the electoral boundary of the Waihemo ward does not follow the actual catchment, well, in part, of the Wainakarua River. So if there is any split of the Waitaki district, and particularly in regards to the Waihemo ward, then I would certainly request that that is taken into account. And we've seen that with the submission of Federated Farmers, who puts a picture out, and of course a whole stampede of comments come after that, because people believe in what they see in a picture. So therefore, if any, and I would imagine that our proposal is going to include some maps or pictures, that difference is actually made clear. Another couple of parameters that I've put here for myself, and I'm happy for anybody to provide their opinion on, but whilst I've got the speaking staff, I might as well mention them, is that I personally do not believe in the unitary authority that Waitaki is part of, that also includes the city. I think that that would be way too dominant for us, and we would end up being a backwater in a much too larger unitary organization. You mentioned, Mayor Taverdale, that you have a meeting with Nigel Bowen on Thursday or Friday. I'm going to be very blunt here. We've had the experience of the waters discussions with Timaru, and from then I really got the impression that Timaru is very dominant and likes to set priorities for themselves. And although I really think that that is part of the detail, I do believe that we should mention in our document or in our proposal how important it is to maintain local presentation. Following up on what Deputy Mayor Ryan says, I think that is a key point that has to be expressed. Not into detail, I think that will come later, but as an important point that has to be made in our proposal. Finally, it hasn't really been discussed this, but it did came up quite succinct in the presentation we saw last night. I do not believe in a coastal unitary organization and an inland unitary organization that, to me, would actually end up splitting catchments of rivers. And I think that would only create a bigger problem than we already have, to be honest. So I definitely do not agree with that. So those the parameters that I set for myself, and I would appreciate it if they can be thought of. Happy to be discussed as well, but certainly being thought of as being part of our proposal.
Yeah, I think just to talk to the coastal versus inland Otago, that was an initial sort of first discussion around the mayor's conversation. I think that all mayors have moved away from that being a viable option. I think the catchment's a big part of that, but also just out of everything in the Morrison Low work, that was the one that stacked up the least. So we were happy to shelve it, but we wanted to still present it to Otago councillors as it was, because you know, we've gone through a thought process. We need to let everyone else go through the same thought process. Around the dominance of some councils over others, which I absolutely take your point on, and we're really mindful of that. Some of the smaller councils alongside us that aren't that large in the scheme of things conversations that I've had with them have been around how do we work together and to make sure we are all at the table and we're all party to decision making, and that this is not just led by one and the rest of us are taken over. We are all really mindful of that, and I think that's where the balance, and Waitaki has a real part to play in that. And I think some of the other councils are looking to working with us in that space to make sure we can create that balance, because I think it's really important in this mix. And yeah, again, devil's in the detail, but that's the intention from day dot. Finally, Councillor Thelner.
Yeah, a lot of it's already been said, and I fully agree with Rebecca and with Franz. We can't leave this to chance, in my opinion. I think this is a huge opportunity. We need to work collaboratively and cooperatively with the other councils. It needs to be all in good faith. I think the Southern Waters, there's a lot of learnings from that whole process that we can probably transfer straight across to in a lot of ways. We've got to remember government makes the real decision at the end of all this. I'd like to think that they'll do so with a mandate perhaps sometime after the election, and possibly even with a referendum. I think it's that big of a change that I think I do agree with some of the people in the community that have said that actually everybody should have a proper say in this. We're only doing the broad outline at the moment, but it actually has been, it surprised me quite a lot in my ward how much thinking people did, how quickly. We've got a lot more information, a lot more direction, a lot more detail than what I expected. It's been a really good discussion, and it is very much pointing north. There's no getting away from that, whether you're looking at just the general opinion, or whether you're looking at the government's what they're trying to achieve from it as well, and also just the catchments and a lot of the things that have been discussed. I originally assumed there'd be a lot more sentiment to go south, just with the natural way of things, but people have gone to a more objective level, I suppose, rather than subjective. So that's certainly made things a bit easier for this decision today. The farm systems around Canterbury is a massive point. It is the vast majority of the area of the districts and of the proposed new districts, north or south, and we do have more synergies from Canterbury. Looking into the new planning system, that's where the freshwater farm plans came from, and also it's where the farm environment plans that this part of Otago has been operating under, with incredible results environmentally. So it's been hugely successful. I am still really concerned about legacy effects that might come across from the way that ECAN's ended up. The regional councils, the way they've ended up is one of the major catalysts for what's driven this, right from the grassroots, from the original group of farmers that got together and lobbied the preferred party to come down this road. So I think if we go north, we're going to be really relying on the RMA reform to not get us back into old patterns that have created this problem in the first place. And it'll be there'll certainly be a lot of importance in the way it's drafted, and then and the way that precedents get set over the future and inevitable court cases too. When it comes to the bigger picture, I want to highlight to the CE, the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor who have been delegated this next part of the task, and to follow on from Rebecca's point about the voice. And I think democracy it needs to be forefront in this next part of the process. It's a massive problem with rural infrastructure governance, where the people at the end of the line can be seen as a problem by the people who are setting the budgets for the governance at the governance level, because you've got one farm at the end of a road which costs a lot to maintain, or one farm at the end of a power line, or one farm at the end of a water line, And so you might look at that one property out there and think, you know, that will be a problem. It's not a problem. That's where exports come from. That's where a family lives and pays rates, probably pays 5-10 times the amount of rates that I do in a residential property. So I think it's the democracy and voice. There needs to be some balance between that and good governance too. I think, like I said at the start, the Southern Waters provides some answers in some way there where you can get quite good democratic oversight of the infrastructure while also having some skilled professional directors who are specialists in that particular type of infrastructure to get to get some financial sustainability and not fall into some of the traps that that democracy can lead us into by always trying to keep the rates low, for example, which has come at a real cost. If we look at roading, for example, our approval rating for roadings in the 30s, you can see them deteriorating. Our own data shows we're not meeting our own low benchmarks for roading. We can definitely use this as an example. I don't know what the answer is, but I just like, we're just looking for the answer to keep those things at the front of mind, the rural people out there where a lot of the rates are coming from. A lot of people living remotely, subject to a lot of shortcomings under the current thing. If we can fix some of those problems, that would be great.
No.
I just wonder, and I'll be perfectly happy for you to rule it not a point of order, but given that we've said there's going to be a 9 and a 10, is it prudent to just take a 5-minute break to actually draft those 2 additional propositions before we go into the vote?
I think first of all, we need to start on the actual decision, so we know that if we've actually got there's no point spending a whole lot of time wordsmithing them if we're not moving into the head start or haven't got a direction. So I think we can build that as we go, and yeah, certainly work on that because we've got a few timeframes to work to as well. I'll get Arlene, if you could put the recommendations up on the screen.
I also had the motions from Councillor Cowles.
Okay, fantastic. So we might have had Councillor Cowles do a fair bit of that work for us. So we've talked through and we've added a few bits and pieces around the rural leaders. Now, just going back up to number 2, the proposal will maybe initially include the whole of the Waitaki district within its current boundaries. So just showing that there's a wee bit of a work to go on that, and then we can talk to notwithstanding above the exploring. So it kind of leads on a bit and just shows there's a wee bit of questionability around that. So we'll start with the 1 to 8 because I think we're clear on those, and then we'll move into the next proposals from Councillor Cowles. So
You're moving back into standing orders.
yes, sorry, I will reinstate standing orders. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Hopkins. Yeah, I'll move that. So all in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against?
May I speak to the
just wait a second, please. We'll just get it started because I'll start by speaking to it and then I'll pass to yourself.
Don't we speak before we vote?
Yes. And I will speak and then you will speak.
Oh, sorry. No, you asked if people were in favour.
Yeah, that was around reinstating standing orders.
Oh,
yeah. So then we've got from number 1 to 8. I will first of all just I'll move them from the chair, and that's been seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Is that correct? All right. So we will be speaking to this. Can speak to any of them, and I can put them separately because I recognise there's a lot in this. Just want to. I think we've covered this off really well today. But just want to say this is one of the biggest decisions we will make. It hasn't been an easy one, and I think being forced into the timeframes we've had means we haven't spent the time with the community and that conversation that we need to have. And we haven't spent the time gathering the data and looking at what it could actually mean for us financially as a council, what it could mean for us around our social services and the implication for a lot of government provided services. I do think, as been mentioned, this is a real opportunity though. And it's an opportunity because I think in the Head Start, what they're asking for as well is not just us giving our direction and our thoughts, but it's also if things need to change or be done differently, the start of that conversation with central government can be ignited through the Head Start proposal. So I think we do need to think about what things we need to not do in the next wee while we step something like this up, because there's a whole lot of things that council is going to be working on in the future, things like representation reviews and things that is just money down the drain in this kind of environment. So where we can actually engage with central government and really build into our application the things that aren't going to make sense in the short term for us to be working on while we actually put our resources where they need to be, which is getting the best outcome for Waitaki in the long term. So for me, that's a really important part of this. I think through this application as well, we need to look at where central government can help. And I've talked about when we are doing some of that detailed work, there may be help available to councils in that space. And I think we really need to lean into that, because anything that we can get that is helped through central government that we don't have to fund and our ratepayers don't have to fund is better for Waitaki, because like every council is struggling with, this is another unfunded mandate. There is currently nothing earmarked in the government's budgets to help local government through these changes, and it will cost. So where we can find any assistance, we need to make sure we take that on board. I think we absolutely need to step into the conversation as soon as possible with any partnering councils and make sure that this is being built by all the councils at the table, not by any single individuals, because I think it's really important that how we set this up as a partnership rather than any type of takeover, that starts now. And I feel really, really strongly about that. Just want to say thank you to staff, because on top of the rest of the insanity that has been this term, this has been another thing, and there has been so much work done to get us to here. So I just really want to thank Alex, Joe and the team for putting this paper together, with information coming in absolutely last minute, to Deputy Mayor Ryan for joining me in the Canterbury conversations. It's really helpful to have someone else at the table. To all councillors, because you guys have gone above and beyond in this space. We have had to ask so many more hours of you than you should be needing to do. We've asked you to be brave. We've asked you to step into this conversation rather than duck away from it, which in the environment that we've been operating in is really, really hard to do. I think what we're doing today is listening to the community, but it's showing some leadership here too, recognising that the only people that can step us strongly into this environment is ourselves. And so if we don't take this opportunity, it is an expense to our community. So thank you all for that. Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, Mel. Look, I would start by saying that this solution is not my solution. If I was to create an ideal New Zealand from an administrative point of view, I would opt immediately and fervently for the Swiss model. I actually like devolved authority, subsidiarity, decisions made at the lowest possible level. And I'm quite comfortable because there's evidence in the Swiss case of cantons as small as 5,000 people making major national and international decisions through the binding referendum process. Sadly, although I personally prefer that solution, it's not the one we are being offered. And in New Zealand, we have a historic situation where the provinces were abolished. Central government treats local government as its plaything, and that's true of parties on both sides of the centre line, shall we say. And this is the most recent endeavour to create efficiency and economies of scale, which it turns out look as though they're going to be relatively modest. It is an issue, and I agree with Dan, who's re-emerged. We may be not as big as we think we are. Well, in one sense we are. Geographically, we have a land area the same as that of the United Kingdom. In population terms, we have a population the size of Melbourne. So it is perfectly legitimate to say that New Zealand is a city trapped in a country's body in terms of population. And for that reason, perhaps a rationalisation of local government and a reduction in the number of councils alongside a new and reconsidered, more permissive planning environment will be of benefit both in terms of development, population expansion, and economic growth and financial and social well-being. Certainly that's what the government anticipates, although I think that their enthusiasm should be tempered by the rationality of our analysts and also of Mr. Palmley, who's made the point, and I think it's shared by executives and those who've looked at the matter closely from around the country. The savings will be modest, and in and of itself, this reform will not solve the fundamental structural problem of local government, which is that we've got about 10% of the money and 30% of the infrastructure. And at some point, central government's going to have to actually acknowledge that it must actually start contributing in a new and better and more substantial way. For the moment, we've got this Head Start option proposed by them with a very tight time frame. I don't mind that. I quite like the idea of essentially, if you like, placing a bet or picking a favourite or acknowledging a preference. And if I may just finish with a sporting analogy, I was trying to think of something that linked to the World Cup to explain the choice in terms of a penalty shootout, but that doesn't quite work. What I think makes more sense, if we look at a sporting analogy, given Paul's point that we've got one option and one option only to put to them, is an Olympic race. And sometimes you see the 100 metres with 3 or 4 runners at the finish line and very little between them. Now, we've ended up in a situation where there are southern options and northern options that do have very little between them. But we have to choose, because that's the deal we've been offered and the proposal that the government has signalled it wants. And our community, in that sense, is clear. I think it's fascinating that in every meeting we've had, it's been the river, the environment, growth, life, and the centrality of water that has actually driven the community's thinking, so much so that there's 5 times more support for looking north than there is for looking south. So I guess the anxieties about Timaru don't necessarily are not as substantial as the potential anxieties about the bigger centre further south, Dunedin. But our community has identified what it sees as its communities of interest. And it is surprising that they have chosen to cross traditional and historic boundaries, Otago, Canterbury, but they have. And we are proposing a new administrative regime and area that I think has commonalities of activity, purpose, use, and focus. And I would implore elected members of other councils to acknowledge what we have in common and to accept that if this is to proceed, we actually all need, to some extent, to park self-interest and put collective and communal interest at the forefront as we work together to get an outcome for all of us that works in the best way to protect the local voice and local interests as we engage with Parliament.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Deputy Mayor Ryan.
Thank you. I guess I just want to start by echoing a lot of Councillor Founding's earlier comments on the quality of the conversations that we've been having since the government announced the Head Start process. I've been really heartened by the response from our community, and thank you to all of the staff and everyone who's gone above and beyond to get as much information as possible in front of both us and the community, and thanking everyone who has been part of those conversations formally or otherwise. You know, we're not comfortable with the timeframes that we have to meet, and there's still so much detail to come through this next phase. But whether it's through Head Start or backstop, reform is happening. And what we've also heard clearly from the community and this process hasn't been don't do this. It's been around don't get this wrong, use this opportunity wisely, and look at all the opportunities that we've got in front of us. I will be supporting the resolutions in front of us today in progressing the northern option. And while I do so cautiously because of all the pressures we have in front of us and the long-term impacts of this decision, I also have a lot of optimism. And I've landed here today for a few different reasons that have mostly been covered by everyone, so I won't go through those again. But I'm also really encouraged by a lot of the conversations and the relationships that we've had with our northern neighbours through this conversations, especially Mackenzie and Waimeri. They've existed always, but they've developed a bit more deeper lately. And we talk about rural, but it's tourism. We look at the Alps to Ocean, for example, the shared economic opportunities, the conversations, that already exist, and those partnerships that are there. And yeah, it's really great to have those councils sort of their willingness to think beyond existing boundaries. But I guess my focus probably today is the next stage and what we develop from here, because that's even more important than the decision that we're making today. A lot of the conversation so far has focused on boundaries and structures and challenging and the challenges that we're facing today, and they're all very important considerations. But as we move into this next phase, assuming we move into this next phase from this discussion, I really want us to start thinking bigger. I wasn't born when the last major reforms of local government happened in 1989. And so we are talking about the biggest reform of local government in a generation, and I really want us to have that vision to match that. We often talk about needing to make mokopuna decisions, thinking generations ahead, and if there was ever an example of that responsibility, this really is it. So when we're taking this next step, we should be asking what people are going to need from local government, not right now, but in 2050. What challenges are they going to face? What decisions do we need to make today so they inherit something better than we have? And that's what I want this next stage to be about: building capability, resilience, strengthening partnerships, creating opportunities, thinking across generations. Because whether Head Start is a proposal is accepted or not, change is coming. And I want to make sure that we're helping shape that change rather than just reacting to it. One of the things that I'm really encouraged by in today's resolution is the involvement of our community leaders in this next step. And as we were reminded in an email last night, one of our greatest strengths is the depth of knowledge and expertise in this district. We have some pretty incredible people with experience and with wide-ranging experience. And I really want us to be drawing on the very best thinking that our district has to offer. And another principle that I really want to see embedded through this work is equity. And Councillor Hopkins kind of touched on that earlier. This can't become a competition of who keeps the most assets, who avoids the most costs, or what district comes out ahead. If one of us wins, we should all win. And before I finish, I do just want to acknowledge you, Mayor Tavendale. I know that's been sort of strong, thinking that you've been strong on too. And I guess just unlike almost every other mayor in New Zealand right now, you've had a very unique challenge of leading conversations across two regions, balancing all the different perspectives, boundaries, relationships, and possibilities. And I think through that process, what I've really appreciated is your willingness and ability to keep lifting the conversation above just protecting our own patch. We've seen a lot of these conversations become quite territorial, drawing lines, defending what people already have, and I haven't seen that here. You're consistently asking the bigger question: what are those long-term outcomes, not just for Waitaki, but for future generations, looking beyond boundaries? And that's the sort of leadership that I think this process really needs. And I don't think there's anyone better to be leading Waitaki through this next phase of work. So thank you for everything that you are doing. This process, requires all of us to leave our egos at the door, and we need to keep asking ourselves the same question. Will this decision leave the next generation better served than the current one? Toitu te whenua, whatungarongo te tangata. The land remains while the people come and go. So for all those reasons, I will be supporting the resolution before us today, not because we've found the perfect answer, but I think it's a pathway that gives us the best opportunity to build, and the responsibility to build something better for those who come after us.
Thank you. Councillor Cowles. Oh, you're on mute, sorry, Brent.
Apologies. Thank you, Mayor Tivendale. Yeah, look, I'll be backing this motion and I'll speak about a few things I'd like to hold on to as we develop it. For me, the biggest cost in local government isn't lines on a map, it's bureaucracy and how we work together. When I look north, I see communities a lot like ours, rural and coastal towns feeding inland farming, irrigation, and tourism country full of practical people who roll their sleeves up. If we're going to change how this works, and we know we have to, I'd rather do it alongside communities who operate like we do. The preference in front of us today is not perfect. Leaving the door open for others to build scale, I think, is important, but not here to force anyone's hand. Whilst Ashburton and Clutha and Central Otago, keeping that door open, I think, is important. But we need to have a starting point, and we need to put a hand up and start moving forward. If we don't choose a direction, someone will choose it for us, and we risk being split up or left as an afterthought. But I'll be honest, in an ideal world, I'd be looking wider than any of this, as Councillor Lewis makes a fair point. As a country, we're about the size of Melbourne, or population of Melbourne, not necessarily size. And you'd have to ask whether running a place in the South Island such as this and not looking at a South Island wide view would serve us better, but that's not what central government's put on the table. And we've been handed the guidelines in a short runway to work within. So that's what I'm dealing with here today. Nothing about Head Start is set in stone. Even if we back this today, there's every chance central government looks at the wider picture and decides another option is more viable or more to their liking. That's exactly why I want us to stay clear on some starting points now, on local voice, on the catchment. So whatever shape I suppose this ends up taking, those two things are high on my priorities. First of all, the local voice, Ahuriri is my ward, and I'll be straight about that. But this is bigger than one ward. Whatever we join, our communities can't become a rounding error in someone else's council. We can't be seen just to be, I suppose, put to the side. So I guess the reason that I've added the extra or asked to add the extra parts to the motion is to protect those voices. And picking up on Deputy Mayor Ryan's point, I've not tied it to the community boards. If we're serious about doing things differently, local voice shouldn't default to the model we've always used. I want us free to design something that actually engages our communities, as long as the protection itself is locked in. And if we look at some of those engagements that we've had through local and passionate people who are skilled, educated, and they're passionate about their place here, we need to ensure we have more of that voice. Through this engagement, it's been really heartening, some of the discussions that I've been having. Second, on the catchment, our community has been loud and clear on this, and rightly so. The Waitaki isn't just a river, it's irrigation, it's energy, identity, and it feeds the braided systems our rural schemes depend upon. I'd like the proposal to tackle catchment management head on, so including the Waitaki River Authority option, if amalgamation doesn't pull the whole catchment back together, in my mind, is just a really good protection. So for all of those reasons, it's not ideal in many ways, but this is a starting point. We have a lot to design moving forward, but I'll be supporting the motions.
Thank you. Councillor Thelman.
Yeah, I think probably to our neighbouring rural catchments and councils that are considering whether or not to get into Head Start and probably wouldn't naturally look north. I think my message would be that if we're looking for efficiencies of scale, we're looking for the wider benefit for everybody, for our people, then I'd say you're invited to the party, because the more councils we get in any one authority, the more efficiencies of scale we'll get. because they're fairly modest the way they are at the moment with the proposals. The catchments have definitely got to stay together, and it's good to have a rural council, in my view. But definitely the invitation's there to bring some blue sky thinking, because it's about rising, it's the tide rising all boats, and we've got a massive opportunity here to actually solve a lot of the problems that we've had. And if we want the biggest voice for remote rural areas like ours, the more remote councils we can join together, the bigger the voice.
Councillor McCone.
There's not much more to say. I think from my personal opinion, all the thoughts expressed so far are pretty much on the mark of where we sit right at the minute. I think the biggest opportunity we've got, regardless of which way you think you should go, and provincially, it's actually for the betterment of the district, and we never need to forget that. That is what we're doing this for the future. It's not tomorrow or next week, it's the next 30, 40 years. We know how what's the word I'm looking for, monotonous the local government can be, and central government making decisions. And this is not going to hang around for 20, 30 years. It could be 40 or 50 years before it's changed. And in that basis, the amount of money that needs to be spent on infrastructure and to keep this country growing has got to be looked at a bigger picture further afield. I think we have a huge opportunity here. You know, people talk about a glass half full and half empty, but I think we've been giving an empty glass now, and we have the opportunity to put in what we want to and how we need to get it going forward. It's not going to be easy, but I think there's more opportunities out there than not.
Councillor Schlack.
Thank you, Mayor Tevender. I do get this feeling that we really don't have a lot of choice here. I worked quite diligently over the last week, drawing maps and redrawing and looking at populations and areas. And I think the best solution would be to extend Waitaki District to include the whole of the Waitaki River catchment, join up with Central Otago and Clutha, and possibly Queenstown Lakes District. That would give us well over the 100,000 population the government is going for. However, that to me is the best solution, but with Central Otago and Clutha, particularly Central Otago, basically sitting on the fence, then that's an option that's not going to fly. However, I do believe that the importance of the river has to be recognised. I went to all of the community consultations, we bar one, due to illness. And the message is clear, the Waitaki River is so important to our community. And this is one occasion that we definitely have to listen very carefully to what our community has to say. On that note, there is this sort of vagueness or question mark around the Waihima ward, and I've already spoken about that and where I think the boundary should lay there. However, if that is going to be an option, and that is not going to be decided before the 9th of August, but when it does get decided, or it comes to a decision like that, if it comes to a decision like that, I think community consultation around the Waihima ward will be extremely important. And that could be even in the form of a referendum. I take Deputy Ryan's point, Deputy Mayor Ryan, that, you know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it to drink. So, yeah, we got to go and encounter people that can be bothered responding to it. But I do believe we have to do that exercise if we get so far. The only option really at the table is the one joining with Timaru, Waimate and Mackenzie, possibly Ashburton. I believe what is being presented here as a resolution leaves the door open wide enough for other districts to join, and I hope they do. I think it will simplify government within at least the South Island in our portion of it. The way it is now cannot continue. So I will be supporting this resolution. Not the ideal one, as I explained, but at the moment it's the best one we got. And I think Mayor Taverdale and Mr. Palmley for forming this resolution in a way that still leaves that door open for other options to come in the future and to work out the detail. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fanini Tahiti.
Thank you through the chair. Likewise, I'll be supportive of the resolutions that we have in front of us today. And I think for me that it needs to come from a place of not Waitaki and other councils being acquisition exercise. I think it needs to come from a place where we are participating equitably, that we're working hard to get a good outcome for the community. And I think when we look at the late 1980s reform, it feels like these reforms last about 40 years in terms of the life cycle of them before we reevaluate. So take that in mind when we are preparing the assessment and the greater detail. I am mindful of the social cohesion, like that we have as well. And it's important for the community to retain their transparency and their accountability. And also their identity comes up in the survey outcome is important to them. And I just wanted to acknowledge that the submission that the Waitaki Irrigators Collective mentioned around the economic impact studies that do show the importance of the population growth that we need to consider, the jobs, average income, school roles, the impact of, like even sporting and participation, overall community wellbeing. So I'm quite supportive of that angle in terms of the rural community and what that provides for us. So yeah, I am supportive of it, and there are a whole lot of other factors that we do need to take into consideration. And probably lastly, I'm not quite sure if my family ties will allow me to support Crusaders at this stage. So yeah, it's a work in progress.
You're most welcome to keep wearing your blue and gold. Councillor Lewis.
Thanks, Matt Savendale. It's the South Canterbury supporting that I'd be more concerned about, Hannah. With regards to this, unlike Deputy Mayor Ryan, I was actually alive, and not only alive, I was working at the time of the last government reforms, which doesn't seem that long ago. I did a bit of work. My preferred option, I looked at it. I mean, we boundary 6 councils, 6 unitary authorities, and if you took Westland out of the mix of those, that would give us a population base, including Dunedin City, which I know has some degree of contention, of around 250,000 people, which is a reasonable scale to be looking at. I do question whether we're brave enough. I think we're very parochial, and I think we have to recognise that there's always these lines, these divisions that we can find, Highlander or Crusader, rural or urban. All of those kinds of things. And I think we've got to get over that. This is a new way forward. We are setting something up for the future. And I think we have to be realistic about what we can do and how we can do it. The potential ideal mix is not on the table, really. As I say, for me, it would be Mackenzie and Waimati joining forces and us all going into this together. And as I alluded to earlier on, I think even larger is probably where we need to be looking at scale-wise. And then it's how the representation breaks down and ensures that there's equity across it. I think the important thing as we move into this stage is trust and good faith. You don't want to do a deal, shake hands, and then have to count your fingers afterwards. You want to feel that everybody is actually benefiting from it. And I agree with the comments that have been made. One winning is not everybody winning. And I think we all have to come out of this feeling like we're moving forwards in a positive way. So with that being said, I will be supporting this. I would like to see further discussions with regards to the councils on the south, particularly Central Otago, and bringing Clutha into the mix as well. I think it would make sense. And I know this is contentious, but DCC as well. I think we really have to look and see how are we going to make this the best for the people of our district, bearing in mind our district is going to be a bigger district. It's going to look different from what it looks like now, and we have to be prepared to welcome everybody in and make an adjustment. We're effectively going to be like a big blended family, which brings its own challenges, but also its own opportunities. So I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. I'll get the recommendations back up on the screen. Just really want to outline or underline equity is a big part of this. When we try and create a partnership where everyone does well, then we all win. And what we're doing is improving the way the South Island is operating. And I think where we win and other people win, we all improve. We certainly don't want to be getting to a space where we are leaving some communities behind, or we are winning at the expense of someone else. So for me, that is a really important part of this, and we need to look wider, because New Zealand as a whole needs to be doing better. And if we can all work together to do that, I think there's certainly something in that. I'm going to put these one at a time.
Councillor. I just, I can't see Brent, but he has circulated
We'll come to that. Sorry, I'll come to that. We've got the first eight that we've got a movement on the table for. So number one, which is around developing a proposal for the Head Start program. I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? That's carried. I believe that was unanimous. I can't see the ones on the screen at the moment.
Yeah, aye.
Sorry, Arlene, I'll just double check on that one. Yes, I believe. Okay, thank you. So now we're going to move to number two. The proposal will initially include the whole Waitaki district. So that's just recognised, and that's our first intention, but it does get clarified a bit down number 4. So I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
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 And against? That's carried. Moving on to number 3, the preferred new unitary council will include the districts of Waimate, Mackenzie, and Timaru and Waitaki. So I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
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 And against? That's carried unanimously. Moving to number 4, the proposed new unitary council could additionally include any of Ashburton District, Clutha District, and Central Otago District, should these council agree to this option. I'm going to put that. All in favour, sorry. Councillor Schlack.
I would suggest to replace option with proposal.
Yes.
We are talking 1 to 4 about a proposal, 3 proposal.
That should have been an amendment moved prior to the vote being taken. That's an amendment that should have been moved prior to the vote being taken. If there's no seconder, it lapses.
Can I just clarify why it says option? It's because those councils are considering different options as well. So it's for them to select what option is right for them. And this is one option potentially for them, which is why it's referred to as option rather than proposal.
Yeah, it will build into our proposal, but take your point. Okay, I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
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 And against? That's carried. So notwithstanding the above, exploration of options for the southern parts of the Waitaki district.
We just voted on that.
No, we just voted on the one above with Ashburton, Clutha, Central Otago councils. So notwithstanding the above, number 5, exploration of options for the southern part of the Waitaki district being all or part of the Waihemo ward will continue, including with Otago councils. I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
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 And against? That's carried. Number 6, request the Chief Executive in consultation with the Mayor and Deputy Mayor to develop the Head Start proposal in conjunction with partner councils to be brought back to council for approval ahead of the 9th of August 2026. I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. Okay, so moving on to request the Chief, go down one further. Request the Chief Executive in consultation with the Mayor develop a proposal for a focus group including iwi and identified community and rural leaders to inform the detailed design of a future unitary authority to be brought back to council for agreement. I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. Number 8 is request the Chief Executive in consultation with the Mayor and Deputy Mayor develops a communications and engagement plan to keep our community informed and involved in this process. I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. So now I'm going to move on to the proposed motions from Councillor Cowles looking at the local voice and representation and the Waitaki catchment. So number 9 reads, the proposal will commit to protecting a genuine and enduring local voice for Waitaki's communities, including Ahuriri and Waihemo, in the decisions that affect them. The specific model, which may draw on but is not limited to traditional community boards, will be co-designed with those communities through the detailed design process, with the test being real influence, not representation on paper. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Cowles, before or do I look for a seconder first and then you can speak to it?
Look, thank you. Look, just briefly for me, the test of being real influence and not representation on paper for me means, you know, we heard from so many of our community people up here that have got really good, as I said in my speech earlier, they've got great knowledge of our regions. They've got great knowledge of our land and how it's used. They've got great knowledge of our communities together. And, you know, finding a mechanism where we can hear our voices more, not just by those that are engaged in voting, for me is really important in our communities. So I guess that's, you know, it's all very well for us to have a community board as we do, and I've got an incredible community board here in the Ahuriri, but making sure that all of those other groups that we have up here, catchment boards and those other areas or catchment groups, are also listened to and heard. So I guess that was my desired outcome for that.
All right, so is that one moved by yourself, Councillor Cowles?
Yes, it is.
Yep, and it's seconded by Councillor Schlack. All right, is there any questions or comments on that, councillors? Councillor Hopkins.
Just a very quick one. I personally would have preferred the resolution simply to read the specific model will be co-designed, etc., etc. I'm not going to die in the ditch about it.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. Now we'll move on to number.
May I move a very minor amendment to the last of the resolutions, replacing the word where with the word if. So it would read, including consideration of a Waitaki River authority mechanism if full catchment alignment is not achieved through amalgamation.
I'm happy with that.
Okay. Alan, can you move it up a little bit so I can read that a wee bit better? I've just got Councillor McCone's head in the way.
Well, there's a solution to that.
Yeah, he was happy with that. So that one is moved by Councillor Cowles with that addition. If we have a seconder for that one, Councillor Hopkins, and I'll just wait till it's on the screen so everyone knows what they're voting on. While we're doing that, is there any questions or comments on this one in particular?
I guess just to speak to that, just quickly, I've certainly heard from our communities that this is a very important, I don't like using an asset, but it's a very important topic for our communities, and it ensures that well, it doesn't ensure, but it gives some direction. No matter what happens, that we still have a voice around it. And I've heard that, you know, different options, and this is one that's raised its head probably the most, that may ensure that we don't end up fighting over the river. So, yeah.
I appreciate that. So I've got that seconded by, it was Councillor Hopkins, wasn't it?
No, I don't believe we
don't have a seconder. Do I have a seconder? Okay, Councillor Slack then. I did think that it was seconded, but I got no response when I asked if he'd seconded, so I've just moved on. Okay, so number 10, the Waitaki River catchment. The proposal will address integrated management of the Waitaki River catchment, including consideration of Waitaki River Authority mechanism if full catchment alignment is not achieved through amalgamation. So it's a bit of a backstop for us as an important thing if this doesn't proceed. Is there any other questions on that, councillors?
Could I also just quickly put another, for me, I know there's been discussion of, you know, carving off the artery, and for me this is really important from my ward that this kind of protects that. It changes the focus of not carving up a piece of land to get an asset. I think it's really important that we look at this catchment overall. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Right. I'm going to put that. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. Right, so I think we've got a really good outcome that's well supported. So
I just wanted to check, there were other things that came up in the discussion that councillors said were important to them, and I just wanted to check whether you wanted any resolutions on those. So the other things I heard was around the need to go beyond amalgamation and look at transformation of the system to be part of the proposal, and whether you wanted something on that so that we have a better integrated system that works for communities. And the other one I heard consistently was around achieving equitable outcomes for all communities through this process. So if you want these will be things that we take into the discussions with the other councils, if you wanted those to form part of that guidance.
yeah, I think I would like to move from the chair in that space, that the Head Start proposal includes transformative opportunities for unitaries moving forward, and equitable outcomes are sought as imperative. Is that clear? It's on the fly.
Well, equitable outcomes for all communities.
Equitable outcomes for all communities. Sorry, Arlene, I know.
Happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. So we've got the Head Start proposal includes transformative opportunities for unitary authorities. I haven't got that worded quite right. Here's
for the new unitary authority.
Yeah. So for the new unitary authority moving forward, maybe moving forward. We don't need moving forward in there. So just authority, just one, and remove moving forward. That includes equitable outcomes for all communities. So, and rather than and, that includes.
Brilliantly crafted, Madam Chair.
Voila. All right. So for a second, Councillor Lewis, are you comfortable with where that's landed? Can you see that on your screen?
I can. Yep, absolutely.
Right. So, Councillor Thelman.
I'm not sure of any amendment to that, but we want to be clear in what way it's equitable, because there's different ways you could slice that.
I think that's in the detail, because I think we can't wordsmith.
So we've got enough in the minutes there to have on record what we mean by that.
And I think as well, when we're doing that, and that's part of what's expected, I think that needs to be teased out in our narrative, and we need to make sure it's done to the level we want. I know it's a little bit ambiguous, but I think it gives a wee bit of a direction as to where our thinking lies. Councillor Fanini-Titi.
Yeah, you can kind of include it as a key consideration within the current criteria, deliverability, and yeah, I'm sure they will consider it.
Absolutely. So the this one reads that the Head Start proposal includes transformative opportunities for the new unitary authority. I haven't quite got that right, have I? That includes equitable outcomes for all communities. Does that read right?
Yes.
Yes, we're happy with that. Okay, I've got a mover and a seconder for that. I'm going to put that all in favour. Please say aye.
Aye.
And against? That's carried. So that is the last of our public part of the meeting. Just some updating on our civil defence. We've got a Met Service heavy rain watch for the next 12 hours from 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. Wednesday, the 8th of July for coastal Otago, with a moderate chance of upgrading to a warning. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier today, we are still in a state of emergency, and we'll stay that way until tomorrow when we've got a bit more information. And that's really just to allow us to react as need be. So stay safe out there and on who's watching online. That is us, and I'm going to now move into public excluded. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? That's carried.
Now I apologise to whoever was in charge of the patient. I didn't realise I wasn't supposed to go in